Yes, Minister. If you read the statement from the Taoiseach about the issues that were discussed at the European Council, you might, on the face of it, sort of say, yeah, these are all reasonable, even admirable things to be saying in terms of the justifiable, more than justifiable, criticism of what Russia has done and is doing in Ukraine, and the murder, the brutality, the stealing of children, the kidnapping of children, and just the generally criminal nature of the intervention by Russia from a rotten authoritarian regime. And you might briefly think for a moment, that's because, to use the phrase the Taoiseach kept using, we're standing up in Europe for our core values, democratic values, against the horror that is the authoritarian warmongering regime of Putin. But then, literally in the sort of second paragraph of the speech, they make reference to a new arrangement with Tunisia, where the Said regime is essentially establishing itself as a dictatorship, is putting down the Tunisian revolution, the popular revolution, that was part of the Arab Spring, that was fighting for democracy. The Said regime, with whom we're doing this deal, is a brutal authoritarian regime that have now locked up all of the opposition. All of them. I met with the son of their Cian Corla, their Speaker of the House in the Tunisian Parliament, who's in his 80s and has now been jailed. This is a man who has a long record of writing about human rights. He's an intellectual, pretty, widely renowned and so on for his fighting for civil rights and human rights and so on. And he, along with all the opposition in Tunisia, are in prison by a dictatorship that is essentially modelling itself on the Al-Sisi dictatorship, which was the counter-revolutionary regime that put down the Egyptian revolution, which we're also cooperating with. So, I mean, where stands the core principles? Where stands the democratic values? When you say on the one hand we're against authoritarianism and brutal regimes, and on the other hand we do deals with authoritarianism, brutal regimes that are crushing democracy when it suits European strategic interests. And then, of course, there's Palestine. The most egregious example of these shocking double standards. Putin does illegal annexation, war crimes, crimes against humanity, brutal warmongering, indiscriminate killing. We condemn it. Israel does exactly the same thing, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, for decades. What do we do about it? Nothing. In fact, we do worse than nothing. We give Israel favoured trade status within the European Union. We continue to buy their weapons into the European Union and sell them weapons to kill Palestinian people. Where stands the core values? We've got an extreme far-right regime in Israel that is absolutely saying it has no intention of giving any just settlement, doing any kind of deal with the Palestinians. It's out to wipe out the Palestinians, steal their land, destroy their lives. And we just tolerate it because certain of our so-called allies are allies with Israel. The United States backed them to the hilt. Biden backs them to the hilt. Germany backs them to the hilt. UK backed them to the hilt. What do we say about that? Zilch. Zilch. And then, as has been alluded to, join the dots in all of this. If we're collaborating with authoritarian, brutal, undemocratic regimes around the world, is it any wonder that the people from those countries then flee into Europe, trying desperately to find somewhere better to live? And then we put up the blockers on them and essentially characterise them as a threat, allow them to drown in the Mediterranean. Maybe if we stopped doing deals with brutal regimes that treated our people like dirt and imprisoned their elected representatives and so on, maybe so many people wouldn't feel the need. But as has been said, actually at the moment it's even more irrational because we have desperate labour shortages in every single area of Irish society, and you have people who'd be more than willing to work to help us build the houses we need, to work in our health service, to work in care professions in almost every area. In 16 seconds, I mean, just as an example of this, I was talking to the Postgraduate Workers Organisation this morning who are giving a briefing, and many of our PhD researchers here are from non-EEA countries. But they are paid absolute pittance, and they're not given the proper permits to allow them to work or to essentially assert their rights as workers, even though they're contributing significantly to Irish society. That's just one example of we're not really showing a commitment to people who actually could valuably contribute and are valuably contributing to our society.